I think this is such an important book. Listen to the title, Recovery from an Alcoholic's Collateral Damage. G. Michael Sanborn is in our virtual green room here on Author's Corner, and we're going to talk to him about what it was like growing up, what led to him writing the book, and I think it is a very, very powerful book with a powerful message. So we're pleased to have him on Author's Corner with me, Kate Delaney, here on America Tonight. Michael, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
What was it that made you decide, I'm going to tell this story? I'm going to tell the story about growing up in a single parent home with a violent alcoholic mother. Why did you decide you were going to do that?
We're taught from the time we're really, really little to lie for the alcoholic. And then as we transition to adulthood, I was particularly watching my siblings, is that we remain in denial to protect that alcoholic and deny that there was ever any problem there. And that's not right. We need to tell people so people can heal from all that harm. But just like the alcoholic who finally does go into recovery, when we go into adulthood, we're going to be in recovery for the rest of our lives for what that alcoholic did to us in our childhood.
So for you, what was your childhood like? Peel back the layers for us. What was it like for you and your siblings?
Well, in the 1950s, we started out as a normal, everyday family, and Dad was the breadwinner, and Mom stayed home. But Mom had that underlying alcoholism, and she started to drink beer, and she got more and more into the beer. And she just really made life impossible. She made more and more demands on my father, who couldn't earn enough money to support her habit. He was trying to get her to drink less. And so in her early childhood, it was pretty bad. And she was a disciplinarian, and she was brutal. And, I got one eye here that doesn't work from traumatic brain injury when I was like 7 years old, and she hit me over the head with a broomstick. I got a collapsed sinus when she backhanded me one time. I was responsible for my little brother, and whenever he messed up, she punished me. So we were parentified. My older sister was parentified for my younger sister.
Wow.
There was one time where I remember she was an old farm girl, and she grabbed my father and picked him up and shook him and threw him onto the floor. And my father, as much as I heard so much bad things about him from my mother and from my grandfather, he did what he could do. There wasn't much support back then. And even nowadays, a lot of people, especially men, are reluctant to go ask for help when they have a problem like that. So basically, my mother drove him out. Last time I saw my father, I was 11 years old. So I grew up with that.
Wow. And were there times, too, because of what happened with your mom, when there was money, she spent it on the alcohol? So did you have days where you didn't even have food?
Right. We of course, without Dad and the old breadwinner type mentality, when there was no father around, then we went on to welfare. So when the welfare check came early in the month, the beer was a necessity. So you went grocery shopping about the beer. But my mom, she drank 16 ounces at the six-pack, and it wouldn't, not uncommon for her to put away 3 six-packs. So she got really quite drunk. But then we ran out of money. In the middle of the month and on, we survived on hardly anything.
Wow. So for you, how did you get out of that? How did you break that cycle?
Well, because I was so conditioned, I had some excellent math skills, and my 8th grade math teacher, who got to be my 10th grade math teacher, recognized those math skills. So when I was in the 10th grade, she just kind of one day asked me where I was going to go to college. And I gave her the standard answer. I mean, in my family, we don't go to college. She goes, why not? She says, well, we don't have the money. And she says, come here. And she brought me down to the guidance counselor, and bless her soul, that made the difference in my life. That guidance counselor convinced me to go to college. I went to a really good college, St. Michael's College. I can't say enough good about that. But I was the only one in my family to graduate from college, and that lasted until my daughter graduated from college. So most of my family, half of them hardly made it through high school, and some of them dropped out. So college really set my life in the right direction. All beginning with that one teacher.
Oh, it just shows you the power of that, realizing perhaps what was happening. So you take that, you get into college, and then talk about the Army and having an Army experience.
Yeah, I had med school in mind, but then when I got to college and I saw the different personalities, I decided I didn't really want to do med school, but I had promised that math teacher that someday I'd be a math teacher, but not right away. So when I got out and didn't know what to do, some Army recruiter came by. He was trying to recruit the kid that was working for me. I was running a automotive repair shop. And then he said something to me, and then I told him about my college degree. He says, well, I can get you a guaranteed slot to OCS, Officer Candidate School. So I learned about that, and I said, well, you know what, this business is doing okay, but it's not what I want to do all my life. So I went into the Army, but I had to enlist because you had to be enlisted in order to get into Officer Candidate School, so I had to go through basic training. And we all have that love-hate relationship with our drill sergeant. And he was tough, and it was good because he kept saying, I'm going to save your life someday. And he was probably right. He said probably saved a lot of lives for those who saw live combat. But he was also very fair, and I could see through that he genuinely cared. Coming from New Hampshire, we're only 3% non-white up here. And I went into a unit that was 90% black as well as this drill sergeant. And I learned a lot about race. We're not different at all. I mean, we got the same feelings and same abilities. And he was very good about that too.
And so when you go through training, basic training, and I love your description of that, and then what that was like, then what happens? Where does the Army take you? Well,
again, those math scores, the Army tried to reject me because of the eye, but back then there was a draft. So if you had anything that might keep you out of the draft, you had to get a doctor's statement. So I went to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor, who was a retired colonel, says, no, there's no reason I couldn't go in the Army. So they tried to reject me. But then, of course, they brought the colonel's letter back, so they had to take me in. But then, and my math scores are what really got me in there. And then when it comes down at the end of OCS, you then get your branch assignments, and we all listed things. And I think I put artillery down at the bottom, but I got artillery. And I was looking at that, and the TAC officer came over and looked over my shoulder, and he laughed. He goes, that's because your math scores are too high. But you know what? I don't regret it a bit. I absolutely love it. I went to an artillery unit. We were nuclear capable. Well, I did forward observing, where I practice guiding in aircraft on the target. It was just so awesome, all the experiences I had in the Army. Great, so I come from a childhood where I couldn't do anything right. I went to college and did well. I went in the Army and did really well. It really helped me turn my life around.
So you do that, you have that success, your promise, and where do you take the promise and all of those crazy mad math skills?
Well, when I got out of the Army, I went into the Army thinking maybe a 20-year retirement. But then we decided, my wife and I got married just before I went into the Army. We decided we would want to have kids someday, so the Army really wasn't the best place to do that. So I looked at things getting out of the Army, and well, the police have a 20-year retirement, so let me go try that. So I really enjoyed the high ethics of beginning with my grandmother, high ethics standards in college and high ethical standards in the Army. And then I go into police work, and boy, was I shocked. The ethical standards took a dive. I would witness cops beating people and that getting washed under the rug, and I'd hear them, take the stand and give witness testimony. I said, boy, they saw something different than I did. So I'm surprised. I lasted 6.5 years with that before I went to work for city administration and ran the water and sewer departments so a total of 13 years with the city of Claremont. And I was glad to get back into public works where the ethical standards were back. I'm back now. I was working with contractors like engineers and stuff. And again, my math skills helped me a lot there, running the water and sewer departments. But after 13 years of that, then I decided I wanted to go into teaching. So I went back to college, picked up my second master's degree and with teaching certification, and been teaching. I went back to my alma mater where I graduated, taught school there for 10 years and moved on to other schools. There again, that's where I belong. That's where the ethical standards, and I think about, I've been married almost 50 years now, and people say, well, you got to have common interests. Well, I don't care for romance novels, and I don't care for country music, but my wife and I were securely bonded because we share the same values. So those ethical standards are what really have driven me all my life.
And the name of the book is Recovery from an Alcoholic's Collateral Damage. We're speaking with Michael Sanborn. You can get the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. When people, and you don't hold anything back, which I think is brilliant, because you're vulnerable, you're honest, and you talk about things that happen. What do you hope anybody who reads this book takes away?
Well, first off, because we're all in denial, is for them to recognize, and validate what their feelings are, and go ahead and let them come out, and heal, and let the people around them know. I kept it so secret from my family; they didn't realize what I went through until they read my book. So,
wow, they had no idea. And then the book's out there, and how did they feel about that?
They're all stunned. And my granddaughter, who just graduated from my alma mater, St. Mike's, was just said that she was just intrigued with it. Didn't understand that anybody could be in that terrible conditions.
Michael, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for inviting me.